I think we'll just go ahead and get started. I do want to, at the top of the thing, say thank you so much to Crystal and Lorcan for saying yes, for being part of this reading series. I'm a huge fan of both of your explorations and discoveries, and so glad we could work this out. So anyway, I'll just anyone new, yeah, this is the 10th installment of the I Think I Can't Speak for Everyone Here reading series. This is a reading series for writers, people who have written, are writing, or who I think should be writing. Though poetry is kind of my way of asking, Ethan Hawke to answer my questions about God. This is a writer's space. So vignettes, silences, songs, poems, excerpts from novels, stories, anything from the part of you that writes down the world. This is your space. Whether reading or not, obviously you can turn your camera on or off, keeping it consistent with your comfort level. I will ask you to keep your audio off while the readers are reading. If there's something I'm not seeing or something you need to let me know, you can just drop it in the chat, or definitely unmute yourself and tell me whatever's going on. Also, you can direct message me in the chat to sign up for the open mic if I missed you on email or whatever. Readings will be on YouTube, on the YouTube channel within a day of the reading. And beyond that, any questions can be directed to bluejawedsnake@gmail.com, and I will put that in the chat right now. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Our first reader tonight is Crystal Stone. Crystal Stone is the author of 6 collections of poetry, including Knockoff Monarch, All the Places I Wish I Died, Jim Brawl, Civic Duty, This Is Not a Poem, and White Lies. Her poems have been published in numerous national and international poetry journals, including the 3 Penny Review, which kudos to that, because I tried to get in there like a bunch and I never did. But anyway, Salamander, Poetry Daily, and many others. She received her MFA from Iowa State University, where she gave a TEDx talk entitled The Transformative Power of Poetry. You can find more of her publications at her website. I came to Crystal's writing via an online journal I used to curate called Eyes Acoustic, and later through her book, Knockoff Monarch. What I really like about Crystal's writing is the way it has this kind of constant attendance to the dual roll call of the local and the other. It's kind of the magic of no magic, where inquiry disappears, might answer fulfill a fuller absence. And with that, I'm super excited for you to hear Crystal read, and I'll go ahead and give her the spotlight.
Hey, thank you so much. That was so sweet. We met in Columbus, Ohio eventually and did a reading together, which was really fun when I did my first book tour too. And I absolutely love Barton's work. So I always have a new book and I'm always looking at all of his poems and learning something every time. I figured today I would read some from my new collection that's coming out in October called White Lies. So I'm going to read some of the first poems. It's a lot of like exploring like my family relationships and love and kind of realizing that I'm like a lesbian. um so maybe it's not my family's fault that they were like passing down these white lies, because maybe I was living them too, you know. So anyway, this one is called By a Creek in Boyertown, Pennsylvania. He sees 2 geese still on the pond for too long, decoys. He gives up on stillness. He tries to find another park, but people are everywhere. He practices instead. Dad pulls the wooden call from his pocket, holds the air in his hand. His hands move in different rhythms, like he knows the alphabet of welcome. Each shape of his finger, their placement, changes the length of the cluck, honk, hoot, determines whether a murmur or a moan is drawn out. Who it, who it, who it. The geese come in a V above our heads. It's so cool they came, he tells me, as we follow the dog into the woods. Her tongue grows longer the more she jumps, hanging from her teeth like a limp bird. He tells me to watch for people in orange so we don't interrupt their hunt. How do you know? I ask. What call makes them come closer and which warns them of danger? He's still watching the dog jump, dreaming. I don't, he says, slow, his hands resting in his pocket. So that was like going in the woods with my dad hunting, and I just thought it was like really well, we weren't even hunting, we were just like going on a walk, and he had this call, but he had no idea what the calls were. So like he knew that they were bird sounds, but like he didn't know if it was like a mating call, if it was like an anger call. Like, and I think that sometimes like we don't know what like love is, especially like the first couple of times that we're like trying to experience it. And so, you know, you're sort of like, is that a love call? Is this the thing? Is this it? And then yeah, so anyway, that's kind of where that poem came from. This next one is a cento. And if you're familiar with the cento or not familiar, I'll just still give you like a little introduction. So a cento is a poem where every line in the poem comes from a different poem's work or a poet's work. Mine, it's like they're all from different poets and different poems, if that makes sense. This one is called Cento Raising Herself. When I am close enough, I am reminded only the dead can be still. I call back all the stars are cowards. The rain has more than one face. The spirits are not fooled. I am my mother's bewildered shadow waking from the house of my earliest dreams. Sometimes she loved us. Sometimes herself, which taught us language, things of day and of night. And love, even when it's guttural, will make you ugly. I answer, the room is red like ourselves, willing to burn in the apartment, and there's no proof I had ever lived there. Besides, I am too beautiful. At the time, I believed that love meant your questions persist like the scents around the streetlights in Paris. But I am here, and there is no mother, no smiling sun. When I try, I see the white cloud of her hair through the veil of night. Nobody's body could be that light. Even if I'd been there, even if I touched her face and I stood there every day of the year, my mother was absent. They do that, the dying. I am sure of little, but death is an ill-fitted suit, a smattering of stars you fix. This one I wrote like after my this next one's called Endangered, and I wrote it thinking about like my sister and like it was like when she came back from the mental hospital. Every year in winter, I hear the same sounds and remember them differently. I wasn't always comfortable staying at home listening. Tires spinning on icy snow, a gritty whoosh that sounds more like wear in the throat of a grieving mouth. Tires so fast they could be giving off heat or years. I think less about killing myself now, more about staying alive longer, more vegetables, fewer shots, more steps. At the hospital, my sister learns new ways to die. She watches the nurse save a girl whose face bulged blue veins as the sheets choked her neck. Then the same girl rip an ice pack open with her teeth and drink the blue her face once was. Always saved, but never cured. I wonder how that girl is doing, my sister asks as she grabs another seltzer. Each day she finds new ways to empty. We lock up more and more of the house, razors, aspirins, bobby pins. The lockbox collects, grows. She shrinks, talk about the others she met in her accumulating stays. Once she laughed, she met a cannibal. Now time is a cannibal, it eats itself slowly. Like these dry days and the residual nightmare of an electrocuted body, lithium, starvation. Time doesn't care what is displaced, who sleeps without a bed, what's ultimately lost. Every year I acquire more than what fits in my suitcase, and the seltzer fizzes louder than the birds who fly off, sounding a call like a wet kiss, a squeaking wheel. So some of these are like sad. Let's try to find like maybe one happy one somewhere. This one is called Farmer's Market. Oh, it's 11:11 my time zone. I don't know where y'all are, but make a wish. This one is called Farmer's Market. I wrote it with when I was dating my ex, but it's still happy, even though, yeah, you know, that's over. We fall asleep in New York, wake up in the future. The morning cloud covered sparkled in the reflection of the water. By afternoon, the clouds a gray shale, a pathway through the blue sky. Her eyes are blue suns in the full moon the year has been. The past low-hanging fruit, alto cleft citrus, bottom shelf vibrations. Now at the farmer's market, even the veggies rainbow, our new world colored in shades I've never seen in the wild. Purple, green, and orange cauliflower, pink stem Swiss chard, golden beets, brown petaled sunflowers. This isn't where we expected to find life in Oklahoma's unpredictable hues, but we manifested this, and the lips of the sky will always close with a kiss. Do you want me to, is that good? Is that good on time? Do you want one more? Okay. This is like, I'm going to read a new one that I wrote because I asked my publisher if we could put it in the book and they said yes. But it's not that happy, but it's not that sad. Well, I guess if you understand it, it's sad, but it's not, it doesn't feel sad. Does that make sense? Like, it's like pretty melancholy. It's called Conspiracy Theory. Mermaid eyes, a margarita's iridescent scales. Love has always been swallowed by an ocean in a place no one seems to locate. Love is Malaysia Air 370, a loose Southwest engine. I microdose love holding my breath underwater, reverse mermaid. The water chokes the sun until it's just waves. The clouds are just swelling bruises of the sky. Okay. That's just a little like preview from White Lies. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks so much, Crystal. That was absolutely beautiful. The first two with their allusions to stillness and to trying to hold things and everything. Yeah, thanks for being here. That was beautiful. You did a wonderful job, and I'm honored to be in the presence of your writing and your uh reading both. So yeah, with that, we move on to our next reader, Lorcán Black. Actually came to Lorcan through Crystal, actually, and was taken by its the work's ritual rewarding of randomness that kind of seems to me to forewarn the foregone with an imagery of minor extinction events that kind of reimagine the gutting and guttural saying of scarcity. And I did write that out because I was trying to figure out how I was feeling while reading Lorcan's work. And that's what I came up with. And I'm looking forward to coming up with more. But yeah, with that, Lorcán Black is an Irish writer. His poetry has been published in the Tomahawk Review, Stirring, The Rush, Grim&Gilded, New Writing Scotland, the Los Angeles Review, Assaracus and The Stinging Fly, amongst numerous others. He has previously worked as a broadcast journalist, as a radio newsreader, a print journalist, and now works in higher education. He is a Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net nominee, has been longlisted for the Black Spring Press Prize and the Two Sylvias Prize, and shortlisted for the Paris Literary Prize. His first collection, Rituals, was published by April Gloaming Publishing in 2019. Shout out April Gloaming. They recently published a work by Darren C. Demery, who's one of my favorites. So that's a great press. Also, Strange Husbandry is his second poetry collection, a Forward Prize nominee and Poetry Book Society recommendation. Was published by Seren Books in 2024. He lives in London. And with that, I'll go ahead and give a Lorcan the spotlight.
Thank you. That was a hell of a introduction. So I'm just going to read some poems from my new collection, Strange Husbandry, which was just published in July. It is quite a random mix of poems. I'm going to admit that I kind of didn't really know what I was doing when I was putting this together, but one of my editors kind of quickly realized that a lot of the poems, even if they were talking about war or about the pandemic or mythology, or they were ekphrastic poems about paintings, the underlying theme was always love in some respect, which is kind of funny to me that sometimes, especially as a poet, you're putting together a collection and you're not ever completely fully aware of what you're doing, which I just find really amusing. But I think I'll start with a poem called Lockdown, which London was a very, very strange place to be living during the pandemic, because it is a city that's a bit like New York. It never stops, ever, not once. And I will apologize now if there's any traffic noise, but it is so hot here at the moment that there's no way I can close those windows. But yeah, during lockdown, it was very strange. We were lucky enough to have, my flatmates and I, to have a terrace. And it was extremely odd, especially like during the middle of the day, to walk outside and just see nothing happening. And pretty much the only traffic for the better part of a year was ambulances, which was really disturbing on so many levels. But there was a weird, quiet beauty to all of it at the same time. Um, and yeah, there were quite a few poems about lockdown and about the pandemic, but I think I've only kind of included two in the book, because otherwise it just gets a bit too depressing. But anyway, so the one I chose was Lockdown. Look how quiet it is here, how tight the night bites you. These small mouths, how teeth they're sharp, small movements at dawn, sleepless flower fingers rolling white dough and milk churning over and over. How we care to make a thing beautiful enough to bear. How for days and days there is a new cupcake, a cake, anything, something that folds a softness, anything sweet folded in on itself like a baby, like a sweetness of faces, families over a fence. Spring months march heavy, summer, winter, and wait like long still water, like glass clouded over. And every morning, in the morning paper, death in the news. Dawn birds crying, strange choir, like a host of swallows, burning but flying over. Um, the poem does have a bit of a weird structure grammatically because I suppose I was trying to kind of get like the oddness of the situation sort of into the grammar. So some words are sort of like not quite placed where they should be in the structure of the sentences. And that's one that I keep getting asked about a lot. But yeah, it was obviously intentional. I didn't lose my mind and suddenly like lose the ability to use grammar correctly. But yeah. The next poem I'm going to write is called Bucha, after the massacre in Ukraine. And this one's slightly more personal to me because I grew up with a very good friend of mine who was from Ukraine. He was not there when the war broke out, but there were very many discussions with myself and I'm sure others. We were trying to convince him that going back to Ukraine to fight was not a thing that he should do. That would solve nothing, especially since had not been married that long and now has a small family. I think there was a lot of guilt, maybe, that he felt initially. Thankfully, he got over that and came to his senses. But I can completely understand, as a European, the thought would cross your mind if somebody invaded something that most of us never really thought would happen in Europe again. But yeah, so I was thinking a lot about Ukraine. It's always in the news over here anyway. So it's something that you kind of couldn't get away from watching on the screen, which we're just in such a strange part of modern society now where you can literally watch a war happen. It's just bizarre. But yeah, so this was one of the Ukraine poems. Bucha. You have to remember at some point someone was taking butter out of a butter dish when the windows blew in. And perhaps it was fine china. Then, suddenly, it was bricks. Smoke, fire, human bone. And then a dog, screaming. It became rubble. It became 23-year-olds wielding Kalashnikovs. It became necessary. You Google, how do you make the perfect Molotov cocktail? Shaken, lit, but not stirred. It became a tank rolling over a civilian's car, and children pulled close to burning from a missile-hot building, and running, scattering along a street under gunfire to what? Mass graves dug by Russian soldiers. It became bunkers and lone dogs barking, and all of us watching screen by screen. There are bodies splayed on streets where they ran, though no one comes to claim them. Smoke bombing itself into sky, resembling a tree line, where once upon a time trees used to be. and now there is no real end to this poem. I'm going to lighten the mood a little bit. I'm going to take Crystal's cue on that one, and read the next poem, which is called The Golden Hour, which is about it's about a holiday romance that I had when I was a teenager. The Golden Hour. Once we had days and days of the sea, the shade of green tourmaline stretching out away from us, the sands dusting our ankles whenever you could steal away from the bar when no one would notice. Once we had days and days of your hand in mine behind their backs, small touches, a hand on a hip maybe, or your fingertips stretching the line of my bare shoulders when no one was watching. I don't know what I thought, but I thought, maybe this is the last time I saw you. The breeze full of orange blossom, you standing in sun, in haze, out in the middle of a road in Crete, a dish rag hurriedly slung over one shoulder, and a hand clamped to the soft nest of hair at the back of your head. And I thought, I have lovingly held that head. I have lovingly tussled that nest of hair. You couldn't see me, though from the car I saw you waving. I can't tell you, that expression haunts me still. Not a smile, not sadness, exactly. Something else. And for 25 years, I have failed to find the right word, the right way to describe it. Maybe it's the dishcloth that slid off your shoulder unnoticed. How naturally it came to lie there, as if it had always been there, at your feet, in the heat and dry dust. As if the heart-lost man in that golden hour, utterly broken in the hot street, wavering and waving, bore it no consequence. The heart is an abscess, waiting to burst. I think I'll just read two more. There are quite a few poems about mythology, which I suppose in a way kind of, I hope, act as a kind of a foil between the more modern poems in the book and then kind of but tie in all of the same emotions that we still all feel, even if these are mythological characters, but they're still somehow relatable. And I kind of like the combination of the past and the present, and how I think even through time, not very much changes when it comes to human behavior or human emotions, even if some of it's a little bit fantastical. So the poem that I picked is Circe on Aeaea. I will be the sea, is the Aegean salting its indigos before me. I am the action and the word at once. What was it that was seen in me? Somehow there is a justice in this. They say men scream like babies when the jugular is jagged. First, they are turned to pig and eaten after. I have never been so flush of blood. Take it from one who knows. The meat juice pinkens and sluices if you salt the skin. Listen for the sweet crisp, the crackle. They come to me wielding mouths of sweetmeats. These lucent plums, these tongues I will jelly and eat, very sweetened. It is so easy to entrance them. It is almost sickening. All you need is a wish and a smile, a finger willing them closer. They never see the fire sparking in the quiet, darkened distance, lit like the frail, thin line of a fate not worth knowing. I whisper only of sweet things, their potential, of the many stickied candies they will yet grow and become. And I'm a little conscious of time, so I'm just going to read one more poem, but it's very short. And I think like throughout the collection as well, like I did also, because I suppose I was trying to make it as gender neutral as possible. So writing from female perspectives, there's a poem from my mother's perspective, which I had to check with her, did she want me to put this in the book? Because it was about some stupid argument she had with my dad, and she thought it was hilarious, so she did. I'm not going to read that because it's a little bit long, but I did include a poem about my uncle, because I think the idea of toxic masculinity and how men in the 21st century kind of deal with it or don't deal with it, and the effect that it can sometimes have, I kind of felt like was slightly important to touch on at least. And my uncle was a lovely guy, so he was not what you think of as a typical masculine man, but I think he tried to be, although it never, he was just a softie. He could never quite like be as butch as I think like probably he pretended he was. But yeah, so this is called a poem in the voice of my dead uncle. My heart is learning to be a butterfly. Like a small boy, it practices every day. It wants to be a man. So one day it will teach itself to leave me, and it will learn, like every man, what it is to be a forest, to be a sea of branches, a still, silent ocean. And it will learn silence, such sweet purple, the color of rage. And I think I'll leave it there, but thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much. That was absolutely beautiful. I'm not too sure I'll soon forget the imagery of the butter dish, and the how things can interesting when you talked about mythology and kind of how the past and the present, when you talk about like China, uh I mean, like fine China, or there's always this like so there's the immediacy, right, of a ritual you do where you um you know, the butter and the butter dish, this and that, but these things have been handed down, right? So that's like storytelling, but also in the immediate moment, and then the aftermath of destruction, and you know, all of these things are of a piece of the storytelling and things like that. Thank you very much for sharing, and those were some beautiful poems. With that, I think we do have one person so far for the open mic. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Carla Seret, who never met in person, but we overlap a lot online. So I'm excited for you to um, hear them read.
So one poem?
Yeah, I mean, one or two, whatever your space requires, it's fine.
Okay, I think I'll read two. They're both San Francisco poems where I ended up in this phase of my life after my husband died. The first one is from my first collection, Paper Prophecies. I walk through Dragon's Gate past tourist shops with girlish things, turquoise satin pouches, crimson keychains, unicorn lunchboxes, glow in the dark yo-yos, party favors from a brighter decade, before I misplaced my calendars, before I forgot about wars and murders, crowds jostled here for hanging ducks. All's disappeared like a mad conjurer's trick, yet my favored bakery survived the year. A stooped woman, tiny as my grandmother, smiles the smile of sad women. She knows. I used to come here as two. Our hands touch, but not long enough. She sells me a bag full of fortune cookies. I wish I could tell her I come upon pleated strips in drawers, in the hollows of old purses. I store my paper fortunes to see the word happy, to see the word tomorrow. And this next poem is from my chapbook, My Family Was Like a Russian Novel. And it is about Mission Bay, where I live now. I've never seen an ugly bridge. And that's a quote from Marilyn Monroe. No one jumps from the 4th Street drawbridge. This is not a place for dying. Too close to the water, Mission Creek is too shallow. But when its siren sounds, everything must stop. Traffic is patient as the bridge's heavy black arm lifts, so a single sailboat may glide to blue houseboats. A little girl laughs from the sweet height of her father's shoulders. She weighs less than groceries. The water's spotless and clean. She looks down on a circle of egrets who meet at odd hours, and she waves to the birds and the sailors. She will remember her father loved bridges. She saw earth was not solid. Anything can fall. When the bridge's leaf was level and so many pictures taken, she and her father and all of the crowd crossed the wooden walkways on their way to buy milk and wine. She could not wait for the next time the ground would lift again. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Those were beautiful. I love the you know, coming here as two, the disappearances and the lifting of the ground. Thank you so much for reading. With that, we didn't have anybody else for the open mic, so I had a couple poems that I was going to read from some people I admire. While I'm reading these two poems, if anybody wants to join in on the open mic, just throw it in the chat and I'll get to you. I think I pretty much got everybody, but the first thing I was going to read was a selection from Kazim Ali's Silver Road, essays, maps, and calligraphies. It's from a section of the book called "Tell Me Again, Polar Vortex: How Bodies Change into Other Bodies." Normally, this frosty weather system circles the North Pole, but because of the warming Arctic Ocean, it presses southwards. I am no climatologist, but I know this snowy friend is the tail end of a system-wide shift that also included Hurricane Sandy traveling west into the east coast of the United States. Systems shift and change with only a little impetus from here and there. Several years ago, as 2012, a year that was one of many predicted apocalypses, slowly shut itself down, I had one of those painful New Year's Eve party conversations with a person who I believe thought me a real space case. The more I tried to explain my point, the crazier I sounded even to myself. But now in the cold light of day, my general argument seems to me completely rational. This is what I was trying to explain. Since we as human beings are made up of metals and minerals, and the earth is made of these same materials, couldn't there be something akin to magnetism that draws us to one part of the planet or another? Could that be why some of us are drawn north or south, or to rivers, mountains, or sea? And what does it say about me that I am so attached to places where mountains fall into the ocean? Where I live, the water of the Great Lakes crawls up into the air and hovers there all winter in a thick cloud, so I've had to learn the art of the supplement. In my case, vitamin D pills on account of the dark and snowy months of lake effect, along with vitamin B12 on account of my veganism. Here is the rest of my New Year's argument, the part where the other person really thought I'd gone out to lunch. If human bodies are affected by minerals in the earth, which seems reasonable, then could our current states of mental health be correlated to mining and fracking? And if the moon alters tides on the earth's surface, and our blood too is a liquid and so must similarly be affected, can some physical truth basis for astrology be so far-fetched? I lost him there, I lost myself. And the second one I was going to read was from Blas Falconer's Forgive the Body This Failure. And the poem is called Evening Walk. The conversation I have with myself all day is the one we never finish. I don't want to think of us less and less. The field spreading out until the moon between the trees is just another thing I don't tell you. All right. And that's all I had. Thank you so much to all the writers for being here. The recording of the reading will be on YouTube within an hour or so. And with that, thanks again all for being here. I'll let everybody get out of here since it's a weekend. And love y'all. Have a great night.
Thank you again.
Sure thing.